Okay, we are going to start our program this morning. I'll first start off by introducing myself. My name is Ronnie Zamora. I'm the Agriculture Extension Agent with a Cooperative Extension Program with Prairie View A&M University. I'm located in Willacy County and also in Cameron County. Also, joining me as a part of my partner with the program this morning is Dr. Abdul Hakeem, and he is the extension agent, the agriculture in Fort Bend and Brazonia County. And we will be hosting this program this morning. The topic will be on animal selection and breeding. I want to thank Ms. Ashley James Helleran. She's our program leader, currently. And so she's going to be following us through our program today. And also our administrators, I want to thank them for making these programs that we have possible today and helping guiding us for our future and having more successful programs. So I will go ahead and also I want to let you know as you're on our program this morning, towards the end, it'll be about an hour program. Towards the end of the program, we will have an evaluation. It's a very short evaluation. If you can just take a few minutes to complete the evaluation, that's very helpful for us for future programming. So if you can, just take a few minutes to complete that evaluation. And I will start off by introducing our first presenter. We have Mr. Joseph Romeo Ozuna. He is the agriculture agent, and he is in Starr and Hidalgo counties down here in South Texas. And he will talk to us this morning on bull and heifer selection. Romeo, I'll kick it off to you.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Ronnie, for that introduction. I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So basically what we're going to do is just go over some slides on bull and heifer selection. So when you all are working your operation, whether it be a cow-calf pair operation or seed stock or things like that, these are some techniques that we want to look at in order to select our animals properly. So again, my name is Joseph Romeo Ozuna. I'm the AgNR Resource Agent for the Cooperative Extension Program for Prairie View in Starr County and Hidalgo County. So basically, the outline for today is we're going to just go over some animal structure terminology. We'll go over body condition scores, and then the bull and heifer selection techniques. So some of the terminology that we kind of look at is called splay-footed or knock-kneed. That's when the animal is viewed from the front, the knees are close together, and the feet and the toe are away from each other. Pigeon-toed and bow-legged, that's when viewed from the front or the rear, the knees are set too far apart, causing the toes to kind of turn inwards. Cow-hocked as well. You know, it's kind of when you're viewing them from the front or from the back, they turn inwards as well. We have sickle-hocked, we have post-legged, we have buck-kneed, and we have calf-kneed. So as we're going through the slides, I'll have some pictures to show you all for each term. So like I mentioned before, splay-footed and knock-kneed, that's when viewed from the front, the knees are close together and the feet toe away from each other. This problem is often seen in extremely light muscled and narrow-chested cattle when the legs are narrowly set too close together. Pigeon-toed or bow-legged, when viewed from the front or the rear, the knees are too far apart, causing the toes to turn inward. So if you look at this diagram here, you see where the knock-kneed or splay-footed, where they're turned outward, and bow-legged or pigeon-toed, where their feet are turned inward. You don't, when you're selecting, you want to make sure that you pay close attention to these details. The correct diagram obviously is the one here to the right. So you want to make sure that those two front feet, when viewed from the front, or from the rear are straight and in a position where you don't see that type of angle. We go back to the splay foot and the bow-legged, the pigeon-toed when viewed from behind, kind of the same concept. When the back feet are turned inwards and outwards, those cause a lot of issues structurally on your animal as they continue to grow or as they're in the pasture. So again, make sure that when you're selecting, you look at these small details. Sickle hocked and post-legged. Sickle hocked is when viewing the rear legs from the side, the hock has too much angle or set, causing the heifer and or steer to stand too far underneath itself. Often these calves will drop or droop excessively from hooks to pins. So if you look at the sickle hock diagram, which is this one right here, you kind of see where it has too much angle, causing the animal to stand too far underneath itself. So from your hooks to your pins, this area here, you want to make sure that they're not too far underneath or in front of each other. Post-legged, the hock has too much angle at the set, and the calf is too straight at the joint, resulting in very strict and restricted movement because of the lack of flexibility. The more cattle become unsound because of being post-legged rather than sickle hock. So if you look at the post-legged, you see that there is no angle right here where the stifle area is. So you have that issue where the restricted movement can cause some issues structurally as well. Buck need and calf need. Buck need this is when the calf is over at the knees, or it's called buck need. Full extension of the knee cannot occur. When observed from the side, the legs appear slightly bent, and this is usually seen in cattle that are too straight in the shoulder. So if you look at the buck need diagram right here, you see how he's kind of buck need from the front, and that causes, again, issues as far as structural, as far as their structure is concerned. Calf need, this is the other extreme, the opposite of buck need, where the calf stands back at the knees when viewed from the side. So this would be your diagram of your calf need picture, where the calf stands back at his knees. So the correct diagram would be where you look at your animal from the front or from the back, from the side, wherever it may be, to ensure that the structure and the posture is correct. You don't want to have any issues further on down the road. So as we continue to move on, we go into body condition scores. Body condition scoring is a useful tool to estimate the body composition and energy reserves of beef cows. The body condition score scale ranges from 1 to 9, 1 being very thin and 9 being obese. So if you look at the diagram here, you have your ranges of thin, which is 1 extremely thin, which is no fat. You see the hip and the bones and the ribs, the tail head, and the ribs project quietly predominantly. Then you have a number 2 and number 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 9. So you have your thin category from 1 to 3, and then you have your moderate category from 4 to 6, and then you have your fat category from 7 to 9. Now, cows that have a body condition score of 5 or greater, they have a tendency to breed back earlier because they have more vigorous calves at birth, and they have more high quality colostrum. So you want to keep your cattle at a body condition score in the moderate to high moderate area. Ideally, scores should be recorded if you have that opportunity between 60 and 90 days pre-calving and at calving as well, and also at weaning. So taking scores at 60 to 90 days pre-calving allows enough time for you to kind of adjust your nutrition program or whatever you're doing for your cattle. So those that want to practice, this is always a good practice to kind of look at. Once you get into the fat category, you have a lot of reproductive issues because there's a lot of fat that comes around the ovaries, and it's very hard for those females to get pregnant. So you want to ensure that your animals stay in that moderate to high moderate condition. So some of the things to kind of look for when you're selecting females is to look for a feminine head on your female. Look for a nice, trim, neat throat, around the dewlap area or the brisket. You want to make sure they have a long, clean neck, a good, strong top, have that depth of body, a good spring of rib, your smooth shoulders that kind of blend in from your rib to the shoulders area, good bone, and obviously, you want to make sure that they can travel well, where you have a good placement of your feet and legs, as they're walking. So this is kind of some of the things to kind of look for when you're selecting your females. These pictures here are some of my cattle. I'm a cow-calf pair operator. So these are some pictures that I have here showing you the sire and his offspring. So this is kind of what I look for. The sire that I purchased here, he's very, very well put together. He's really, really long. He's really deep. He has a lot of bone in his front 1/3, which would be right here, his front 1/3. He has plenty of bone, plenty of shoulder, down towards the back 1/3. He has plenty of bone on his legs, good strong top, just a complete looking animal. So when he had his calves, this picture over here to the right, this is his daughter. So as you can tell, he passed those traits onto his offspring. If you look at her, she's a big, big, big broody cow. She has a strong top, long, deep bodied, very muscular, has a lot of bone, great underline. She has a little bit of an excess of dewlap around the brisket area, but still a very, very adequate functional female that I chose to keep behind as a donor female and a replacement mama. These pictures are of another herd sire that I have and the dam. So these two heifers are full genetic sisters. So as you can tell, sometimes they don't always come out the same color, but these are two full genetic sisters. And I have a picture of this one right here at 4 months of age. As you can tell, as they're growing, you're going to be able to kind of tell if they're going to be functional or, they're going to be cold or whatever you all want to do, sell to the market. But if you look at this 4-month-old here, I mean, look at her structure. I mean, she has a straight top. She has a good blending here in her shoulder, in her rib area. She has a nice clean neck, not too much dewlap, little nice feminine head, little extension of neck. So that's something that you want to look for. Down here, this is the same female at 13 months of age. Didn't change at all. All she did was grow up to be a young mama, young heifer. And so if you see what I'm talking about, you can kind of tell that as they're growing, this is kind of the thing that you want to look for. The picture over here is her full sister, same exact month of age that I took the picture at, 4.5 months, and pretty much the same quality. Long, straight top, good depth of body, good muscling, good underline. And the picture down here, this is that same female at 14 months of age. So these are kind of things that I look for when I select replacement females for my operation. Now this picture here, this slide, I have the picture of the same female here, that red dark one, to kind of show you the difference in selection. So if you look at these two pictures over here, these are some of the females that I did cull, that I did sell to the market because they don't meet the qualifications of the quality of animal that I'm looking for. If you look at this one right here, she doesn't have the depth. She's lacking a lot of bone. She just doesn't have that top that I'm looking for. The one over here, she's a little bit too short. They don't meet my standards. So when I try to select, I look for bone, I look for depth of body, I look for spring of rib, I look for the extension of the neck. those type of things that are going to make me a functional female. So these two pictures, these two females were culled and sent to the market. So when we talk about femininity, when you're looking for females, you want to make sure that they have, like I mentioned before, a long, clean neck, a clean angular shoulder, good blending of the shoulder and the forerib, and a refined head, kind of a small feminine head with a narrow muzzle. You don't want your females not to look feminine. You don't want them to have a big coarse head or too thick around the neck area or too thick around the shoulder coarse area, because you want to make sure that they're female. You don't want them to look like a steer or a bull in that matter. This female here, it's a little video. So if you see her walk, you notice that her front feet and her back feet fall right into place as she's walking. She stands, has a great extension of neck. She has a good long top. She has a great underline. She's a little excessive here on the dewlap, but that's just the way that breed is. But if you see, she has this depth right here. I kind of call this the square. So I want to make sure that I have a square when I select my females, and that just tells me that she has the capacity and the volume to, once she gets bred, to carry a baby well and be a functional mama. She has a great udder, for being a 7-month-old calf. So this is something that we want to look for. And not all breeds are the same, but in this particular breed, as a Beefmaster, this is just one heck of a fine female. So the overall heifer evaluation, we kind of want to look at the degree of muscling. Meat is the end product of beef cattle production. So heifers must have adequate muscling. However, sometimes the muscle in excess may limit the function and production of the heifer. So if you look at these diagrams here, the degree of muscling, when you're looking from behind, you don't want something too narrow or something too wide. You kind of want to look at something that's going to be functional for you as they get older. The style and balance deals with how well all the pieces of the heifer fit together. Points to consider when evaluating style and balance include straightness of the top line, the balance between the body width, depth and length, smoothness and angularity of the front end, and the blending of the shoulder, the ribs, and the hips. Obviously, this image shows the correct style and the balance for a breeding heifer. So here he gives you all the details here, kind of what we've been talking about through the different slides. You got a straight top line up here. You got a long, clean neck here. You got the width, you got the depth, and the balanced length on this female. Capacity and volume. Heifers need a good capacity and volume so that they can convert forage into meat or milk and have the ability to maintain their body condition in the pasture environment. So if you look at these images, you see this female here. She's very narrow-bodied, pretty much no spring of rib. This one here is too short-bodied between her front shoulders and her back legs. So, you kind of want to look for something right here. And as I was talking about this square area, this female here shows adequate volume and capacity. So this is something that you kind of want to look for. Now, I put these pictures up here, kind of just to show you all the difference of the Beefmaster cattle and the Charolais cattle. These are just two different breeds. No reason why I put them up here, just to kind of show you all how the breeds have come along and how they've gone from a big broody cow, and as genetics have been changing and producers kind of working through there, how they've developed a little bit more moderate female to a more smaller moderate female. Now, all these Beefmaster females here are pretty much, they're all made of the same breed. They pretty much all functionally work well in their style, their balance. As you can tell, they all have their own set of qualities. This big broody cow, long, deep, muscling, great udder, underline, access a little bit of dewlap, but that's fine. This other female here, if you look at her, she's long, she's deep. They all carry pretty much the same quality same qualities for a functional female. But as the times are changing, you see how they go from big broody to moderate. Same thing here with the Charolais cattle. You got a big, long, broody female here, and as times go, they start changing into more moderate females. So that was, kind of the techniques to kind of look for females. Now, when you go into the bull selection, the purchase of a sire is a major investment, both financially, in terms of genetic contribution he will have on your herd. A bull contributes 50% of his genetic material to each calf, but you need to remember that the calves he sires dramatically increases the magnitude of the bull's contribution to your herd. It's estimated that 80 to 85% of genetic improvement in a herd comes from bull selection. So determining priorities and breeding objectives is very important to accomplish your long-term profitability and to assist with bull selection. So random bull selections will result in random production and prodigy results. Begin by assessing your females and identifying their strengths and weaknesses and determine your breeding objectives using a balanced approach to trait selection. The more things you try to select for, the less genetic progress you're going to have. So you need to make sure that you stick with one goal and move from there. So what are the benefits of buying better bulls? By purchasing better bulls, obviously we produce more calves per bull. We can get more progeny that can grow faster, produce progeny that have desirable carcass traits, produce future breeders, which will produce more valuable offspring, produce animals that repeatedly meet market specifications. And for the years that they're in the herd, these bulls will obviously sire superior male and female progeny. And improvements using genetics are permanent and will continue to acclimate as high-performing sires are selected through the process. These are some of the American Beefmaster bulls. Some of the American bull breeds in the area that we have here. We have a Black Angus, we have a Charolais, we have the Beefmaster, Brangus, Brahmin, and Red Angus. These are some of the different breeds. Down here in South Texas, where Ronnie and I are at, we see a lot of Beefmaster, we see a lot of Brahmin, we see Charolais and Brangus. And basically, the Beefmaster and the Brahmin are very popular down here because of the tolerance that they have for the heat down here in South Texas. It does get pretty hot down here. So when we look at the soundness and the structure, it's pretty much the same aspect as when you're selecting your females. You don't want to have a splay-footed, you don't want to be knock-kneed, you don't want to have them bow-legged or too straight or too much angle in their hooves. You want to make sure that they're all functionally correct. You want to make sure and look at their top. You don't want to have any protruding shoulders like this one right here, because that does pass on to your offspring. You want to make sure that they have smooth shoulders. You don't want them to be, like I said, too straight-legged, because that with a straight shoulder, you want to make sure that their hooves are correct. Too much angle, too much straight can cause structural issues. When you look at their hooves from the front, you don't want to have any of these dew claws or hooves overlapping one another, because that will cause issues in the future for you. So if you look at these two bulls, there's nothing wrong with these two bulls, but each bull here is different in its own shape and kind. This bull here, he's not as big, is not as muscled as the one over here, but everybody is different. Everybody's eye is different. So if you want to kind of depict these bulls out real quick, you can tell that this bull over here, his sheath is a little bit raised versus this sheath over here. This has a little bit longer sheath. They both have a good angle to it, but this one's a little bit higher up. The head on this bull is a little bit smaller than the head on this one. So you want to make sure that when you're selecting your bull as well, You want to look at their head. You want to look to see what, in other words, you want to look at their head because that kind of helps you determine the size of their calves. You're not gonna just know that the animal is going to weigh 75 pounds or 85 pounds or whatever it may be, but that's a good determination to help your females when they get bred, that when they calve, they're able to calve well. So these two bulls here, like I said, both great, but different in their own shape and kind, depending on what you want to look for. These next slides are videos of different bulls. No comparison. It's just kind of to show you how they walk, what to look for when they're walking. Notice how they travel with their feet. Look at the bone and that type of observations. This bull here, he's a little bit bigger bull. He's more of a fleshier, meaty bull. So those individuals that like the Charolais breed or are looking for these type of animals, this is something that you can look for when you're selecting. He's really nice as far as his structure. He's deep. He's very well put together. This other bull is a little bit smaller, moderate bull. So he's not as muscular and is not as deep as the first one that we saw. But like I said, there's nothing wrong with either one of these bulls. It's just a preference. He may be younger or may have, not as much feed as the other one. But like I said, both great bulls in their own shape. As well here, these are two different bulls as well. As you see this one walks, very, very well. You look at his feet, he travels soundly, very structurally correct. His posture, the way he carries himself, it's kind of like a young man. You want to have that head up. You want to be able to show off yourself as you're a herd sire. This other one over here, there's nothing wrong with this bull either. He's just one of those bulls that's just kind of a meteor bull. He's probably a little bit heavier, but you can tell the difference when they walk. His feet are not as sound as the first bull over here, number 26. So those are just little techniques to look at when you're selecting bulls. These two here, pretty much the same thing. One of them is a little bit high strung than the other, but both bulls are great. It just depends on what you want to look for. Each of them have depth, each of them have bone, each of them have the capacity, good top lines. So like I said, the selection part is very, very interesting when you actually go and look. So like I said, these are just techniques to kind of follow when you're doing selection. Just real quick, these are expected progeny difference. So when you're going to go find a bull or look for a bull, and if he's registered, ask for the paperwork, ask for the prodigy, look at his EPDs, make sure that he's, see where he's at in calving ease, see where he's at in birth weight, see where he's at weaning weight, yearling weight, things like that, what percentage he falls within the breed, that kind of help you kind of figure out how your prodigies are going to be with those animals. So these are where some of the references where I got this information from. And like I said, that kind of concludes my presentation because I know we have another speaker. Like I said, my name is Joseph Romeo Ozuna. I'm the Ag and Natural Resource Agent for Star and Hidalgo County through Prairie View A&M University, the Cooperative Extension Program. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call or email me. Get with Ronnie, get with Miss Ashley James, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Romeo. I know we had one question, but I think you answered that right there at the end on EPDs, if you consider EPDs for your bull selection and inspiration of physical conformation. We do have a question. How often do you change your herd bull? How many cows per bull?
It just depends. I normally change my herd bull every 3 to 4 years, because if he's throwing out good females, you don't want him breeding back his daughters. So you kind of want to look at that situation. If he throws out 5 or 6 good females, then you need to change him, because you want to continue that line, and you want to introduce better genetics to continue your functional females to continue the quality. How many cows per bull? My opinion, I would put maybe 15, 20 cows per bull. No more than that. You can put more, but what you're going to do is you're going to hurt your bull. You know, he's going to lose weight, because he's breeding and breeding and breeding. You know, depending on the cycles, he may breed some, and then 21 days later, he may miss one. Another one comes into heat, so he's always working. So you want to make sure you keep that number low, in order for him to cover those females as quick as possible. So I would recommend, no more than 20.
Okay. Good deal. Well, that seems like all the questions we had in the chat box, Romeo. Good information there on strategies to look at your heifers, your bulls, and your soundness, and then make those evaluations for your operation. So good information there. Well, next I'm going to go ahead and let our next presenter present this morning, and I'll let Dr. Abdul Hakeem make the introduction for that speaker.
All right, thank you, Ronnie. Can you hear me, right?
Yes.
All right, so our next speaker is Dr. Foxworth. He's a research scientist with Purdue A&M University. Dr. Foxworth's research interests are in small and large ruminant reproductive physiology, in vitro fertilization, transgenic animal production, and management of biosecurity facilities for animals used in research and commercial applications. When you see outstanding quality of research done by Dr. Foxworth at the International Growth Center, you feel bright future of Prairie View A&M University in animal science research. So without further ado, Dr. Foxworth, please take it over.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen. Let's see. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. I just wish it was on the other side. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to cheat. So you all aren't looking at the side of my head the entire time. I'm going to go ahead and move this on over. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate Romeo's presentation there. I will let you all know in case anything happens. I think maybe one other person here knows, but apparently right now I'm on the Prairie View campus, and we have numerous bomb threats, and they are evacuating the campus right now. So luckily I'm on the farm, and we haven't had anybody come out this way yet to evacuate us. So I just wanted to let you all know in case they pull me away. Sorry about that. So I'm going to kind of come off of the things that Romeo was just saying, and I look at it in a narrower perspective, but I think a lot of what he said was very important to what we're going to talk about right now. The only reason I say that for the preparing for the fall breeding is because that's the next breeding period coming up. So I'm going to jump right on in here if it's working. I want to move. There we go. So there are a couple of things that you really need to think about as you're getting ready to go into the breeding season or reproduction, whatever season it is. First, you need to make an assessment of your current conditions. So, for example, in this case, we're going to talk about, first of all, what is your current forage condition? Is there enough forage to supply the cow's nutritional needs? And you got to think about it. I'm going to have breeding cows, and then I'm going to have pregnant cows. And so they have very unique nutritional needs, and do I have the forage for that? What about my forage? What about the quality of my forage? I need to test that forage. Am I having issues with trace minerals, for example? Those are the kind of things that you need to assess before you begin your actual breeding and utilizing the animals that you're going to have for those purposes. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then also water status. Is there an adequate quality water supply to make it through gestation? And that's really important. A lot of people don't think about that. Of course, here in Texas, depending on the region you're in, we've just gone through some big droughts. That's been a primary issue with these situations. But in my area, even though we've just been through a number of years of droughts, we have now way too much water. And so nobody can even get in there to cut their hay, for example. So please think about those things, plan ahead, but then you need to assess, okay, I know what my conditions are. I know what my forage is. So what is the carrying capacity given the current and expected future conditions? Am I expected to be in drought for longer, for example? And then you need to adjust your stocking rate for the future, what you're expected. Because if you don't have the correct stocking rate, you're going to have poor nutrition for your animals, and that's going to lead to poor reproduction. And that's obviously what we're focused on right now, is the reproduction of our animals. So make sure you know that, but also think about if you overgraze it during breeding and pregnancy, well, then you're not going to have the recovery of your forage when you've got lactating cows. So you really need to plan ahead, think about it as you do this assessment. And I know this was 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago now, but Texas hay season looks bleak. And I bring this up because last year we were talking about, at this time, we were talking about how poor the quality of the hay was. Fertilizer was too expensive. We had no rain. I mean, I saw people bailing, highway bar ditches and things, trying to get anything that they could. Right now in my area, like I just said, we've got so much rain that nobody can get in to cut their hay. Nobody can get in to fertilize their hay. I talked to a hay producer that I get hay from for the International Goat Research Center, and they were telling me that they didn't know when they were going to be able to get in there to actually even get their first cutting. Right now, they should have already had their first cutting fertilized and be getting ready for their second cutting, and they haven't even got their first cutting yet. So these are things to think about. How is this environment affecting what I have as we move forward? So then the next thing we need to do really is assess animal conditions. Now, Romeo did a great job of talking about those animals and their their conformations and their body conditions, and I'm going to hit on those same things, but with a little bit different perspective. So when we talk about the source of your animals, okay, and this was talking about post-drought on farm animals, but everybody sold their cattle because of the drought. Now people are going back and buying cattle. And Romeo is talking about those animals that you're selecting. But right now, a lot of people are going and buying sale barn animals, okay? And we're going to discuss that in a minute because they're trying to rebuild these herds after they've had to sell off cattle during the drought times. But what is the pregnancy status of the animals, okay? How are you going to assess that? By palpation, by ultrasound, by blood test. Those are critical decisions to assess. Then the body condition score that Romeo was talking about, and we will get back to that in a minute and its effect on reproduction. But we also need to evaluate the reproductive tracts before we go in here, especially if I'm buying new animals. Now, he was talking about that conformation, but for me, when I'm looking at these cows and I look at those same conformation points, But now I'm going to look at, okay, what is the conformation of the uterus? Is it a good uterus? Is it a bad uterus? Am I going to have problems with this cow? So that's something that you can also use to evaluate as you're preparing for the fall season. And then I want to mention, he talked about the bull selection and how much the bull improvement has on your genetic improvement. Well, the number one, and I want to talk about AI just briefly here, but why would I use AI? Well, the number one reason to use AI is that it maximizes the use of superior sires. So Romeo was talking about those superior sires, and especially if you're looking at EPDs, and say I've got a group of cows that, as he mentioned in there, they've got the smaller body frame and so forth, and I'm concerned about putting a big bull on that where I'm going to have calving problems. Well, then I might want to use a bull that has low EPDs, but then I've got other cows, birth weight EPDs, but then I've got other cows that have the big body frames and everything. So I want those bigger cows because that's going to be more money at weaning time for me. So I can select bulls that way. So now if I use AI, I'm able to select and pick and choose which bulls go on to which cows rather than having just a single bull to use. It's important to look at it from that perspective. The other thing is prevention of transmissible diseases, less handling of often unruly males. And, you know, if you're in the dairy industry, you know that almost all dairy cattle are bred by artificial insemination. We also know that dairy bulls are some of the most dangerous bulls out there. So it just kind of highlights that point. Lower cost of maintaining a diversity of bulls, and that's what I was just talking about. I can get a lot of semen cheaper than I can buy, say, 4 or 5 different bulls to meet my needs. And I have improved herd health and management through AI. Now, why shouldn't I use AI? Well, it's labor intensive. You have to do heat checking. You have to handle the animals more because you're administering drugs and so forth to them. Take some special training, or you have to bring somebody in from outside to do it. And record keeping is a must. AI can be expensive. AI equipment, the liquid nitrogen tanks, or the liquid nitrogen tank maintenance. In other words, keeping it full of liquid nitrogen so that you don't lose that expensive semen that you've bought, the cost of the semen, things like that. Economic cost of decreased conception rates. Not all cows are candidates for AI programs, and that's important to know. And that's where it comes back also talking about those reproductive tracts. You know, are they sound? Is it easy to pass a rod? Things like that. And you can reduce the genetic base of the breed if you just focus on a single bull and you keep using it and using it and using it. You can bring down the genetic base that way or limit its size. But now I'm going to move on to now talking about animal management and reproduction. So the management of a cow herd has a huge impact on the success of your breeding program. First and foremost is nutritional status of the herd. And I just mentioned that a minute ago when we were talking about assessing our conditions. So I want to make sure that I have the right number of animals on, and I have the right nutrition for that number of animals. Also, the herd health plan has a huge impact on the program. Handling facilities and barn environment, and that's key, especially, excuse me, if you are having bulls on your facilities. Now it becomes very important because you have to be able to keep the bulls away from the cows, except when you want the bulls with the cows, and they can be destructive to the facilities. I cannot emphasize enough, for the best breeding programs, record keeping ability is key. And usually best management practices lead to herds with the best results. So if you work on all of these factors here, you will have better success with your breeding programs. Excuse me. A good herd health plan will increase the success of your AI or breeding program. Okay. A comprehensive plan is composed of a disease control plan, a parasite control plan, and a management plan. But prevention is always less expensive and more effective than treatment. So be proactive, get ahead of it so that you're not putting out fires all the time, and it will help you have a more successful breeding program. Disease control. Diseases are controlled by improving the immune system, which we do that through vaccination, proper nutrition, and genetics, and controlling transmission, isolation, boot sanitation, fly control. Those all add up to biosecurity. And when we do have disease issues, we want to make sure that we're not spreading it to the rest of our herd. But it's very important to understand needs vary by region. So I can't give you the best plan for, say, deep in the valley in the Brownsville area versus far west Texas, out near El Paso, versus the Panhandle versus East Texas. You really need to consult your regional veterinarian and other producers and your county agents to develop a plan that is suited for your particular needs. So part of that management side of this is things like foot trimming. Now, Romeo spoke about the conformation of animals, and I cannot emphasize enough, the feet are the most important thing, because what do they have to do? They have to locomote. They have to be able to get to the water. They have to be able to get to the food. And more than that, they have to be able to chase the cows around to do successful breeding. So it may be important to have foot trimming as part of your program. But if you select, as Romeo was talking about, those animals that have the ideal conformation, then you get away from having to do as much foot trimming. But keep that in mind. And then prevention of accidental abortions. Vaccines, dewormers, and reproductive hormones for doing synchronization. Please read your labels and know which ones are abortificants, because you do not want to just get your whole herd bred and then decide, oh, I'm going to vaccinate with this now, and that cause abortions in your herd. So these are things that are key. Read the labels, make sure you know, and in your plan, you'll know when to vaccinate and when not to vaccinate. Pasture management, obviously rotational grazing, that is very effective with parasite control. That's a whole nother topic, but also toxic plants. And remember that there are toxic plants that will cause abortions, and there are toxic plants that are teratogens and will cause birth defects. So that's where it's best also to know all of the plants that you have in your pastures that you're utilizing for your breeding, reproduction, and calving programs. And then facilities management. Most people don't think about it, but batteries, paint, rusty nails, all that kind of stuff, they will lead to problems. You'll end up with injuries to the animals. And those of you that may have, for example, say, wood alleyways and wood leading up to your chutes, a nail sticking out, if your bull going through while you're going to do some testing or whatever, and they cut their leg open, it's very problematic for them. So make sure that you manage your facilities. They will lick batteries and paint and things like that can be problematic for them. Handling facilities. You have to have secure fences between bulls and cows. If you're going to have a reproductive program and successful breeding, where you're going to make sure that you have the breedings that you want, in other words, those bulls on those cows that you want, you've got to have secure fences. And you have to have a manageable work area. And you really need a restraining device to do some of these programs, like your herd health. If you're going to utilize artificial insemination, you have to have some type of restraining device. Nobody's saying that you have to have, the hydraulic tilt table and all of those kind of things. I had a client of mine for many, many years that had railroad tie fences, brought the cows up, stuck a pipe in. I had to climb up over the 6-foot fence inside to ultrasound the cows and then climb back out. But it was still a successful restraining device. So you do need something along those lines. So make sure that you figure out how to work with that. And then record keeping. Get to know your animals, okay? And then accurate and complete records are essential to any intensive management system. I think, sorry, just they're sending out another bomb threat issue. Sorry, I wanted to check and read it real quick. Sorry about that. Accurate and complete records are essential to any intensive management system. So when you know those animals and you know their calving issues, for example, how well they wean calves, things like that, that's what lets you determine which bulls to put on them. But you've got to have those records. You have to maintain those records so that you know what to use and which bulls to put with which cows, or which semen to use with which cows. And make it useful and comfortable. There is so much software out there now that does most of this for you. Some of them even do the financial management for you too. Find out what works for you. Okay, I grew up in a system where the old 3x5 cards, every cow had a 3x5 card. I've since changed that to computer software now. But make it where you're going to use it, because if you're not going to use it, if you're not comfortable with it, you're not going to use it, and then it's not going to help you with your breeding program. So if you're out there buying cattle right now, and we talked about, for example, Romeo was talking about the conformation and things like that. We did have a lot of people that sold off their cattle. But why are most cattle normally going to the sale barn? Well, they either have a physical impairment, they're not pregnant, okay, after accurate pregnancy detection. They could be old, mature cows, or they have low production records. Somebody's keeping records and they only calved every other year, for example. So understand that many of the cows that are at a sale barn may not be ideal for your reproductive program, but you need to make that assessment. I just wanted to point that out about sale barn cattle. And I think that Romeo talked a little bit about body condition score. This is the Brangus table that they post for the body condition scoring, but of course cattle is 1 to 9. I think it's important to understand this, because if you look here now, cows with a body condition score of 4 at calving are expected to have a lower pregnancy rate or longer postpartum interval than cows with a condition score of 5 or higher. So understand, if your cows do not get enough nutrition during their gestation and when they calve, they will be later coming into heat again. And that's something that you need to pay attention to. And that's why body condition score is critical to look at with your breeding herd. So if you're using a forage-based system, I mentioned this is in the planning stages now, but make sure that you take factors like type of forage, quality of forage, but distances traveled to intake forage and water. Maybe you're in a location and you're West Texas and you have very, very large pastures, and it may be a kilometer or more, mile or more to where the water is. And so they're using a lot of energy to do that. You need to take that into consideration. And always make sure you know in your area and in your pastures particular, do I need to have supplementation for minerals and salts? That's critical. If you're using supplemental feed with forage, or you're dry lighting them, you could be dry lighting them, especially if you're doing an AI program. You may be keeping them up so that you can assess whether they're in estrus and heat and things like that. So you need to understand what supplemental feed you're using. Again, how far do they have to go for the water? If the water is right there, then they're not using a lot of energy to go get to the water. So you may not need as much supplemental feed as you would be if they were out in a very large pasture. Okay, the other thing that I want to highlight real quick, and I cannot emphasize this so much as enough, and that is that your bull preparedness is one of the key factors going into a breeding season. Don't wait until the day of to check your bull. You need to be doing this at least 2 months in advance. Is my bull prepared? Okay. You have to perform a breeding soundness exam, because it doesn't do you any good to have a bull that has a problem that you may not see. They may have good outside conformation, but maybe they have a lot of deformities in their sperm, which means they're going to have a reduced success with breeding. And you won't know that until the breeding season's over and you're pregnancy teching your cattle. So always, always do this up front. We have had a number of programs where one of my colleagues, Dr. Juan Romano, talks about doing the breeding soundness exam. It's a very good program because he shows a lot of how much that one bull's reproductive success can affect your breeding program. But where did the bull come from? If it's from your farm, that's one thing. Did it come from another farm? Then I need to do some tests on that. Okay. Did I quarantine it? Did I conduct a health test? I don't want to bring in, for example, a sexually transmitted disease that's going to affect my pregnancy rates, okay, or may cause abortions, okay? So make sure that you are doing your biosecurity. You're looking at whether I need to quarantine it. It's certainly, if it's coming from somewhere else, I need to quarantine it. But I also need health testing on that bull to make sure I'm not going to introduce a reproductively detrimental disease into my herd. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I know I'm right up on the time, so I'm going to stop sharing there and ask if we have any questions.
Any
And I'm going to look
questions?
at that check. Okay, I'm sorry. I was just checking the chat there, see if there are any questions. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? I think it's important to understand that a lot of what Romeo, Mr. Ozuna talked about first is key. So when we talk about locomotion, being able to walk the bull, being able to mount the cow, those are all very critical in your reproduction and your breeding program. So I would key in on those. I would really key in on those when you're making your animal selections.
Well, I guess with that said, being that in the condition that you're in, we'll go ahead and conclude that this program for this lunch and learn. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of our program. And I hope to see you. We have another program on the 23rd of May on herd health conditions and record keeping. So if you have a chance, we'll see you next week. And thank you for being a part of our program.